Hey everybody, welcome. The Mid-Atlantic Song Contest has been part of SAW for many years. And some years ago, we had an instrumental category for songs without lyrics. So the only logical balance for that is to have lyrics without songs. And the author of this book, Rod Deacey, right here, happened to be our winner this year for the lyrics only category. So Rod, could you tell us a little about your beat poem?
Yeah, well, actually, it started off as a song, and then I turned it into a beat poem, and then I turned it back into a song again, or a song lyrics. Sometimes the beat poems come out like songs, and it's because beat poetry is somewhere in the territory between song lyrics and what people would call real poetry. In other words, they're more accessible than some of the contemporary poetry that you might see in magazines or whatever. And that's intentional. And that's because I work mostly now, having moved from songwriting, as a performance poet, a beat poet, like, with the help of an improvising rhythm section. I've been doing the beat poetry bit for about 8 years now with Ron and Niels. And sometimes songs come out of it on one side, and sometimes real poetry comes out of it on the other side. Mostly I'm squarely in the middle. I've got that book that Ron held up. I actually won an award for literature by the Arts Council in Frederick.
Congratulations, that was a big
2019 prize. Yeah, and I used the money to publish the book, because you can't actually get beat poetry published in the same way as you can other poetry by sending it to literary magazines. And I wanted something to sell because people kept asking me for it at gigs. And anyway, this particular one started as a song, and then I kind of cleaned it up a bit for beat poetry, and I changed it a bit to put it back as a song. And oh, there it is.
Well, we're looking at the lyrics now, and we've never actually performed this as a beat poem. But what I do is look at the words and imagine you saying them, and then I think of a beat, a rhythm and tempo, and you have different parts of a poem. And sometimes you italicize those, or you ask for a different beat. So I see that here, and sometimes you tell me exactly what you want, and it's fun. But do you imagine we'll perform this someday as a beat poem?
Yeah, oh yes, definitely. I actually have it in the catalog right now. You'll notice the bit that's come up on the screen now, Home for the Holidays for the Sense of Belonging. That is the middle 8 of the song, or the bridge, that kind of has a slightly different identity in the beat poem version. But one of the things I've noticed about this, though, after I've written it, is a lot of my cultural references are now getting outdated. And I'm not. I noticed it. I just had a poem published in Pen in Hand, which is the Maryland Writers Association literary magazine, and I had 2 references in there which were, shall we say, 50 years out of date. So a person reading it would not really realize what they were. And I'm wondering how many people recognized my little Jimmy Rogers reference there in that earlier verse there, not the one showing here.
I taught poetry and literature for 30
Slouched
years.
Slouched by the water tank, Jimmy waits in vain.
Yes.
That is from a classic Jimmy Rogers song, Waiting for a Train. But anyway,
the genre that's really associated with beat poetry is jazz and walking bass.
Yeah.
But, some of the original beat poets used saxophone or flute or call and response. So you might utter a few words and then have a little instrumental interlude for a few seconds and then go back to more words. So there are different ways to approach it, but it really is fun. And I'm so happy that you're making more people aware of beat poetry. And in a way, we don't have a lot of music to distract from the lyrics. So when you're doing beat poetry, the lyrics stand out front.
So,
Yeah,
but there's a
the reason
musicality to having watched you perform a great deal, Rod. There's a musicality to what you do that that has like a Leonard Cohen like feel, where even though you are, because he was a terrible vocalist, but he was a great song imparter, and there is there's a theatricality and a musicality to what you do. Can you talk about that a little bit? Are you conscious of that, or is that just are you interpreting the poem?
Well, I'm trying to interpret the poem a bit, but what I'm actually trying to do is make poetry accessible to people, and that means interacting with them. And one of the things which the most successful poets who are out there right now do well is interacting with the audience. And so as I appear, thanks to Ron, in saw shows as a kind of break from songs, mostly, I'm addressing an audience who aren't prepared for poetry. So I don't want to do anything amazingly deep and boring and complex, because that would be an immediate turn-off. So it means I have to bring my lyrics down to an approachable level and dramatize them a little. Yeah, I mean, you're totally right. I do kind of make it a little bit more theatrical than many poetry readers. But
it gives a song performance like feel to it when you do that. When you do that performance, and Ron's playing, got the brushes going, and Niels is playing bass. There's a deep musicality to it. So in some ways, it is a song just of a particular style. And I think, rap seems to borrow heavily from the beat poets. It almost seems like a natural progression from beat poetry to the flow of rap.
Yeah,
You're right.
You're absolutely right about rap. There's a whole different subject there, because it goes in so many different directions and covers a lot of areas. But one of the things that we try and do when it's the trio of us is that we're using the poem and the words as another instrument. It's kind of like in place of the saxophone, rather than instead of it, or of the saxophone playing and then the poetry coming on. With a lot of the early beat poetry, there was a kind of a disconnect between the band playing and the poems, and we try to avoid that by making the poetry an instrument line, which I mean, that sounds pretentious, but it actually works quite well by thinking of it that way. So
no, it's almost a step away from scatting, scatological singing, except that instead of just having nonsense syllables, you have sensible words and thoughtful images. And also, I want to point out that Rod has extensive history as a blues guitarist, and he's very knowledgeable about the history of the rock scene in England too. So you know how to work a room as a musician, only now instead of playing guitar and singing, you're delivering poetry, and you do it better than anybody else.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, the difference, I think, here is that I actually lost my ability to play instruments because I got arthritis in my hands, and so you were the one who pushed me into doing beat poetry. If you want to take credit, credit is totally due there, because you were always saying that my lyrics were poetry, and that I should look more in that direction. So, and then you started playing behind me when I was reading.
That's right. I didn't even ask.
The whole thing kind of grew from there.
I needed no invitation. I was just inspired one night at Brewer's Alley. You were up there reading a poem, and I thought, why should I be sitting here when I can do some jazzy drums? And then we added Ray Joswiak on piano, and it evolved like that. But it became a very popular part of our shows at Brewer's Alley, and then at Cafe Montmartre and the Epicure with the Harried Americans. So you developed a fan base of people who really appreciate the poetry that you deliver. And some of the poems are on YouTube, and they're really a lot of fun.
Very cute. So, Rod, when did you move to the U.S.?
1979.
Oh, okay. So you've been here a while.
And
Yeah, so it's amazing. I still have an English accent, sort of.
Yeah.
you went to the West Coast, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to California for 14 years, and then I came over here in the
Totally overshot the target.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Did you move for a job, or were you always wanting to move to America?
I always wanted to go to America, but I actually married an American girl in England, and then we moved back to California because that's where she came from,
Gotcha.
and we did that to escape Thatcherism.
So
A lot of rock stars did.
Yeah.
Mostly they're going to the south of France. Yeah.